listening to the Bluejay Breakdown.
Welcome into the Bluejay Breakdown and a Bellinghausen and Drake Keeler alongside with you to talk some Creighton women's basketball hoops. Exciting stuff for the Bluejays, best start in 30 years for Creighton and Jim Flannery. 63-49 win over Villanova on the road. A great win against a solid Villanova team in the Big East. Drake, what'd you like?
Yeah, it was a really impressive win, double digits. They played really well defensively. I think that's where you start with this game. Morgan Molly, 24 points. Great game from her. But, Lucy Olson, great player, was coming off a 37-point game, had 29, but took 29 shots to get there. They really held her in check. Mallory Brake and the rest of the defense, just a big part of that. And that was really impressive. And, of course, they are kind of led by that top scorer and held them to 49 points. You will absolutely take that.
Craziest thing about the game, no made three-pointers for Villanova. I think they said on the broadcast it was like 20 years since that had happened at Villanova where there was a women's game with 0 three-pointers made.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy stuff for Creighton to be defending the perimeter that well.
Yeah, you do not see that very often, and obviously, whenever that happens, there's going to be a little bit of luck involved to not make a single three. But, they have defended the three-point line pretty well. I felt like they played, it was either one of the last teams they played as well, was a good three-point shooting team, had gotten a lot of their points from three-point range, and they held them off the three-point line. So, it's not a one-off thing. They really can, defend the three-point line well. Mallory Brake, they've got, size in that lineup, length in that lineup.
Yeah.
And that is really, really important. And they have executed their defensive game plan, pretty well, I think, throughout this season for sure.
Yeah, I remember talking to Jim Flannery just before the season. He's like, we're never going to be the best defensive team, and that's okay, but we can make up for it in other areas and make the stops when we need to. You don't have to bank on that identity because it's just not Creighton. They're a let-it-fly team, just like the men's team, fast-paced, and they want to have more possessions than your opponent, obviously. So good to see them stepping up a little bit more from the defensive end, too. You mentioned it, Morgan Molly with 24 points, Emma Ronsick with 19, and then Lauren Jensen with 12. Of those starters, who do you think's impressed you most on their consistency?
Emma Ronsick, for sure.
Yeah.
She's been really good. We talked about it last week. I mean, she's just really athletic, really just crafty, around, just falling, leading, banking and shots from the post. That has just been really, really exciting to watch. She's a great player, and just obviously that big three has been great. And going back to the defense, even one more time, like we mentioned, they've kind of given up some stuff like in the post inside. Emma Ronsick's been a solid defender, but I feel like that's, when you talk about, they're not going to be an elite defensive team, that's kind of what you think of, like, those great posts are going to get theirs against them. But, they've really been able to make that up, on the perimeter for sure. So that's been really impressive. And
sometimes the mentality for teams is we can give up the two ball, sure, but we're not giving up threes. And I think that's what Creighton's done. And they're just like, all right, we're going to outshoot you. We're going to just simply score more points. And what do you know? That wins ball games. Creighton, again, best start in 30 years for the Bluejays. How high can they go seeding-wise, do you think, in March Madness?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. They've had a great start. It hasn't been obviously like a super daunting schedule, but it's been like a solid one. We talked about it even in non-conference play. They don't really have those
Stanford games.
But they also don't have like those super easy, games that they put on the schedule. Like these are all, solid, legitimate teams. Even if some, had worse years than maybe expected, or having worse seasons than maybe expected. But it's been really impressive this start. And I think, throughout Big East play, you feel like they can continue a lot of this. Obviously, they're not going to finish above UConn probably, unless something drastically changes.
Sure.
But, you look for them to, I think they can, that second seed is absolutely in play. You look at Marquette kind of as a top challenger for that. That's who they'll end the month with. They lost that first matchup. It'd be really interesting to see if they can get that one back. And, the Big East, it's really interesting to see, how they fare. I think it is the conference, there's good teams. Like every team can kind of bring a challenge. It's not kind of viewed as deep as some of the other power conferences. I mean, it's why UConn had it took them a while to get back into the top 10. I think they were like number 15 or number 14, and they like blew out Creighton. They blew out another team, and they barely moved. So I think that's kind of going to be hard when you look at seeding, right? For them to see how they just got to keep winning, right? The games that they can win.
Yeah.
And I think they're projected as a 6 seed right now. You wonder if they can get up to maybe that 4 range and host a game.
I think that's the biggest question is not if and where Creighton will be seated, but can they host is, I think, the biggest question because, I mean, that has to be such an advantage. Not only home court, but you don't have to travel. You can sleep in your own bed. I think that's just big for the mindset and mentality, and it's not something you get in the men's side of things, so it's something that the women's side, I think, really has to take advantage of when you can host. And I know Creighton really wants to, as does every team, but you got Georgetown up next in Washington, D.C., and that is tonight at 6 p.m. Just a preview of that, Drake. What are you looking at in that game?
Yeah, I mean, they have had the best scoring defense in the conference currently, 52.8 points per game given up. That's pretty good. Part of that is due to a very low pace. I guess it's a common theme you've seen, I guess, as we've talked about these matchups. Good defense, low pace, and Creighton's, I feel like they've been well equipped to do well in those games just with their style of play, and they've handled that well. They've executed their game plans, and it's been really impressive. But that's another thing where they're going to have to be on the rebounding. Georgetown's offensive rebounding has been strong this year. So another game you don't want to really fall behind in and kind of be trying to claw back into it. But that's going to be really interesting to see if they just can keep this up. It's another road game. They're on a 4-game winning streak. You want to see them continue what they've been doing. Yeah.
And you look at the schedule ahead, too. You play Seton Hall at home and then Marquette at home, which we always know is a great matchup between those two programs, and then at Butler, at Xavier. But I think there's a good stretch of winnable games. Then you play DePaul at home, you go at St. John's and UConn back-to-back, and those obviously are going to be two of the tougher games in the conference. I mean, add a third there. You play Villanova at home right afterwards. So I think there's a good stretch, though, for 4 or 5 games of winnable material for Creighton, in that you don't want to take any bad losses to hurt your resume. But you also have to keep in mind, like you mentioned, Drake, it is a little bit tougher to get that seeding being in a Big East conference that might not be as strong throughout, a little bit top-heavy and not have as many ranked teams as they maybe would like. Yeah. So you have to look at that, too. So maybe you want to steal one, obviously, if you can, from Connecticut is, of course, a good place to start, but also another one from Villanova wouldn't hurt, and, of course, Marquette. So I think watch out for those maybe 50-50 ball games that Creighton could potentially go out and get.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to just see how long they can keep up this momentum. It's a lot of teams that have been kind of just within range, even on this winning streak, and obviously, they can afford to drop one to one of those better teams, but they have the chance. Yeah, they have the chance to keep up this momentum, and I'm really looking forward to that, I guess, game to end January against Marquette.
Absolutely, yeah. 4 wins in a row for the Bluejays, best start in 30 years. This has been the Bluejay Breakdown with Anna Bellinghausen and Drake Keeler.
A Hurrdat Sports Network production.